Hey everybody, welcome to Wake Up Missoula. I've had about 3 weeks off of my morning show, but I'm here with you live August 1st, getting, dusting off, doing all that kind of stuff. We had a bunch of our summer camps the last 3 weeks. MCAT's been hosting summer camps for movie making, documentary, and animation in that order. Next week we'll be doing horror camp, so I'll be taking that week off too as well, but I wanted to kind of give you an update what's going on here today. It is the first Friday of the month, which I also have your art guide talking about everything that's happening downtown in Missoula and beyond this weekend and more through Missoula events. And also, we have plenty of city council stuff as a catch-up. We didn't have any new city council this week, but I might as well just kind of talk about some of the big things that are happening this month when it includes the budget. So not this week, but the week before, the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act kicked off, resulting in more people talking about some of the concerns and the cuts in Medicaid. So up front is Kristen Newman, who joined at the beginning of the meeting to bring awareness to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which, like I said before, passed 35 years ago under George H.W. Bush's tutelage. So without further ado, here is Kristen.
This anniversary of the ADA is not just a milestone to celebrate. This anniversary lands in the midst of a disability civil rights crisis. As President George H.W. Bush signed the act 35 years ago, his closing remarks were, "Let this shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down." Over the past several months, we have witnessed this very wall of exclusion being rebuilt on a national scale. In this month alone, the disability community is seeing sweeping strides taking place in the dismantling of access to healthcare, education, work opportunities, and community. The ADA is only as strong as it is enforceable. What happens when those assigned enforcement agencies no longer exist or no longer have the capacity to enforce? The ADA has always been a complaint-driven law, the disability community carrying the weight of accountability on our communities and on our government. This is why now, more than ever, it is imperative that the city of Missoula and all local governments consider codifying its foundational language into local ordinances and policies. It's not good enough anymore to just rely on the ADA as something that is a given. Thank you.
All right. Not so long ago that people would actually ban people with disabilities from going to restaurants. And part of the ADA was to help advocate to have ramps and improve mobility for folks who have trouble getting around. So the next topic covered rezoning for expressway up near the airport, intended for uses such as manufacturing, assembly plants, primary and middle industries, vehicle-related commercial activities, warehouse, outdoor storage, yards, and distribution facilities. So essentially, they're rezoning it for industrial, commercial, everything. So consent agenda had a wage agreement with the city police, to which we had former police turned city council member Bob Campbell talk about it a little bit further. So every 3 years or so, the city of Missoula's police department goes through a wage negotiations with the unions and the city of Missoula. And so this is Bob Campbell's response.
It's well-deserved. Like all emergency service here in Missoula, I think both our fire and police are well supported by our community and is reflected in what it is we're about to vote on. I think it's going to help greatly with retention on the police department as well as recruitment. And we just sworn an officer just last week that hails from Denver Police Department with supervisory experience, SRO experience, and it's tough to recruit folks from agencies like that. They're so much larger than ours, and generally those larger cities usually have better compensation packages. So it's great we're in a position that, this town could go out and recruit folks like that and bring them into the fold, and just, speaks to a high level of service and professionalism that is with the Missoula Police Department.
Yeah, it's very much like a lot to do with retention, and competitive wages within larger cities tends to skew a lot of talent away, but Missoula has managed to turn out some of the more police officers every year on par with growth of Missoula. I remember about 10 years ago that they would probably swear in about 5 officers a year. It seems like they're ramping that up a little bit more in Missoula as we're growing. That's true. We're a bigger population, and keeping up with that is more services have to be provided. Hence, we have that new fire department on the horizon for the next 10 years with Firehouse number 6. districts. The Rural Fire District just annexed some property through the county, and while that's happening, we are now going into the budget. So, as the budget gets growing, Mayor Andrea Davis talks about the executive budget presentation. For all those of you thinking the city should be audited, congratulations, they always have been. The MCAT part captures the process in real time with plenty of staff presentations starting as early as January for the fiscal year of the following year. So Mayor talks some of the brass tacks about everything.
When I presented my first city budget last year, I was candid about the challenges that we faced, particularly the structural budget deficit I inherited in the city's general fund. Since then, our team has worked hard to right the ship. While we still have work to do, I'm proud of the meaningful progress that we've made. Thanks to disciplined financial management, we're projecting to spend $2.4 million less for fiscal year 2025 than originally budgeted.
All right, so some good news there. They are also talking about some of the additional revenue and other things they want to kind of help keep up with. $3.1 million in their cash reserves, which is up by $1 million, which is still lower than the state recommendation of the 7% of the overall general fund, which reflects about $5 million for Missoula of reserve funds, making about $1.9 million short of that goal. Mind you, reserves can be used to cover any additional costs that acts as a reactionary source of funds for projects, especially when you're talking about development, and if there's any delays, it gets more expensive. Overall, good news for the city as a whole coming into their next tax cycle, which should bear lower taxes for single-occupied homeowners overall. Cost of living can be rough, especially in Missoula, and the mayor gave a list of examples of some of the money savings they plan to use.
So one of the areas that I've brought forward a cost of living lens, and our departments have been incredibly helpful and dedicated to this. And so I wanted to provide some examples of direct savings that we are seeing in fiscal year 26 budget. Some examples include increased property insurance deductible. We increased the size of our deductible, and we're saving $75,000 annually. And still not making it so much that the deductible is large by any stretch of the matter. We had a $10,000 deductible for an organization as large as we are, and so we bumped that up to $25,000, which is very reasonable. And businesses much smaller than ours have a deductible of that size, and we're saving $75,000 annually. We're building department software adjustments and contract renegotiations, so working constantly on that element across all departments. Our short-term rental registrations are projected to raise $200,000 annually. We have an increased non-tax revenue for our health department licensing. So that is a statute that actually was just passed in 2025 by the legislature, looking at $120,000 of additional annual revenue that hasn't been increased for decades. So that's something that's been in the making for a while. And then information technologies, contract negotiation, and equipment management strategies, around $100,000 of annual savings. And then we have made the difficult decision to close the temporary emergency shelter located at Johnson Street, and that is around a $1.8 million annual savings.
Yep. So yeah, there's as much as I would like to reflect more on the Johnson Street closure, I'm going to focus more on the budget. Even with large amounts of savings, we have the human impact that is the closure of the Johnson shelter. I just thought this was a means to have an 8-month eviction notice, and many have retained and gotten into housing through the housing sprint. There will always be people on the outskirts, and having these closure may make it difficult to help those who have more difficulties adjusting to Missoula housing the most. Not to mention that Trump just signed an executive order recently to institutionalize people of more or less a mandatory long-term stay at a mental institution for some folks who are on those extreme ends, kind of going back into the pre-1960s call for institutions to close. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on my news segment of the show where I kind of take a deeper dive on that. So while I'm kind of getting off topic for now, I'm going to talk about some of the few important aspects of keeping the city running. Roads. So this is some more information about the roads.
We're employing long-term planning. Our 5-year pro forma to forecast and planning in our road district funds includes gas tax and grant planning, and combining the electrification specialist with open transportation planning position. So, Council, you may remember a couple of years ago, you approved a new position for the electrification specialist. That grant was concluding. However, that work is incredibly important for our constituents. And so we were able to figure out how to absorb that into an already allocated full-time employee position in our mobility department in Public Works.
All right, so there's a lot of money that gets from the gas tax, which is a statewide gas tax that's been around for quite some time. Not to mention the one that the county passed, and then the state kind of like kiboshed and said you can't do that. Road districts were made as a tool for people living in the city to tax and generate revenue. If you've ever seen high traffic areas where there's black strips counting vehicles, then you can understand how some streets get better treatment based on the volume of cars. So while we are talking about the budget, how about us, the taxpayer? We got you with some graphs. Feel free to boo at the screen, but some more graphs and more information about how there's expenditures, general funds, and everything to do with the levies, roads, and parks districts, and how everything kind of works together.
These are the funds that show up on your property tax bill as the portion of your property tax bill associated with the city of Missoula. This is how this is broken out here. Our total expenditures are forecasted at $121,460,959.23. And of course, this presentation will be available for the public on our website, and it currently is now. So folks can refer to this later, but this shows how all of our departments are broken out. And then in terms of all of our operations, this is how expenditures are broken out here. So again, you can see all the way down from mayor and council at 0.7% and Public Works Mobility at 29.7%, for example. So the wide range of different operations that we have here at the city of Missoula.
All right. So then you guys get a kind of an idea of the budget and kind of how where it goes, where it's going. This is kind of like a rehash every year because, the city's budget does do some major changes based on the projects and other things that they're moving forward with. But for the most part, when it comes to personnel and operations, they try to increase the budget on par with the cost of living, which tends to be about 4% every year increase in terms of basic wage increases. So if you have a job out there and you're feeling the kind of like the burn with wages and stuff like that, you should be entitled to some form of additional raise or compensation for the time you put into your work. Even just an annual raise of 4% is more than enough to help get you to that cost of living thing. And the best times to ask usually tends to be the fiscal year roundup, which happens to be in July in a lot of places, and also in January. So they usually do like fiscal years in July for a lot of those bigger industries, especially with MCPS and even the city budget talking about those things. And just because they passed the budget in August, which they plan on doing in this month, they still want to figure out what they're going to do in terms of adjusting it every quarter, even if they need to jump into the budget and do some adjustments based on additional money in revenue or some of the revenue that gets cut, hence the East Missoula corridor, which lost $24 million in federal grants recently. So while taxes are explained, they are also drove into fees that are going up from Parking Commission attempts to curb habitual offenders and parks looking to annually increase their fees to continue to operate at a rate that maintains and manages the wear and tear of parks and trail use. However, many of these things Missoula is going to have to manage this year, and the next is the grant system, which, like I mentioned before, lost the $24 million for the East Missoula corridor. But of course, as we move forward, the city's new big plan for the Fox Triangle, the $100 million hotel and convention center aimed at generating $7 million for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the next 10 years. Daniel Carlino talks about the labor unions and keeping it local in terms of having an amendment added to this development.
We've heard a lot of labor unions reach out to us and ask for a project labor agreement. So, in response to all these union organizers and that have reached out to us, I've just added a clause for that. I'll pop it up on the screen. So the first is the project labor agreement, basically saying that the developer shall agree to be a party and require the general contractor, all sub-tier contractors and other successors or assignee of this interest in the hotel to be a party to a community workforce agreement.
All right. So as you saw there, like he wants to add amendments, making sure that the workforce involved with the creation of the hotel is all locally produced laborers, and just want to make sure that that reflects that as well. And Grant Kerr, Missoula Economic Partnership Director, responds to this amendment based on local labor requirements, and this is what he had to say.
I believe it would have a pretty strong chilling effect if the experience of a developer who had come in and worked for months and months, or years and years in this case, to develop a partnership, had new goals established at the 11th hour after an enormous, I don't know that most of you probably aren't developers, and I'm not a developer, but what I've come to learn and really appreciate is that there's an enormous amount of time, money, and energy that is invested in getting a project to the phase that it is right now. And to make those commitments based on financial models and assessments and plans, and then to have those disrupted at this phase in the process, is one that I think would have future developers questioning. And I don't, this is for-profit developers. I believe this is true of nonprofit developers, and whether they're developing hotels or the affordable housing that we all desperately do need to see developed. I think it would have an impact on them coming in here and feeling confident creating these partnerships if they feel like the goalposts move when you come into a city council meeting trying to move the project forward.
Yeah, and in terms of this particular project, in terms of the Fox Triangle, it really feels like it's the city that cried Fox Triangle, and every time there's a new developer, everything that is like, oh, going forward and everything like that. But a lot of times when the city does any kind of special announcement, a lot of times a lot of the ink is just drying out for a lot of this development moving forward. And it's not unlike Dan Carlino City Council to bring up a point. However, this time is the enemy of developer with time. And while we want to have labor standards for the workers, the developer already has their team in place, and having those conditions could have overarching effects that create a work environment that demands a quota of local laborers over the skilled ones that they currently have. So not saying that the local laborers are skilled, but the team and how it all works together can be kind of an issue if the developers never worked with the team before. So Labor Council President Derek Hitt responded from a labor perspective, and this is what he had to say.
So a lot of the times what we do here in Montana is we drop the L and just call it a PA. So a project agreement, where we just work with the contractor for a one-time thing. It's kind of like dating, seeing if it works, seeing if it doesn't. Have a nice day. Yes, I like to dumb it down just so everybody gets a giggle. But the labor peace agreement is something that's a little new, and from what I was reading, doesn't quite jive with a lot of labor practices, and I just don't see it being something that is fulfillable, and also kind of limits the interaction, if there's any, with a union that is established with this, if there's a union established with the hotel, because you can't, basically, what if a person says, hey, are you having a nice day to me? I can't respond to them if they work there. It's just little funky. It's half-cooked at best. No offense.
All right, so that was his reaction to the amendment, just basically requiring specific labor policies added onto it. All flash, no substance, as another amendment added last minute. He spoke about the PLAs, which stands for the Project Labor Agreement. A portion of the meeting was devoted to public comment on this matter, and many agree that it all sounds all good and well, but like Derek Hitt mentioned, it was a means of saying the right thing and not thinking about the process while altering the process in the process. So it's like adding confusion to something that is kind of like straightforward. So Christian Jordan, City Council, tries to help Carlino clarify on this matter.
The city property that we're selling to a private developer. And so it's absolutely within our right and our duty to make sure that the buy-sell is what we need it to be. This is not two private entities engaging in a deal where the city is overstepping. This is city-owned property where we actually can right to our own needs. And so when people call in and say, or one of my colleagues saying that government shouldn't be involved, this is a very different situation. I also think that it's hard to be anti-collective bargaining agreement when you benefit from being a part of one. While I will be in support of the labor agreement, I won't be in support of the peace agreement. I just need to follow what I'm hearing from union folks. But I think that we need to be really careful when we talk about how great unions are in one perspective, but that we don't want to make sure that they are supported in another, and to also really remember this is city property. And so the city can put extra conditions on the buy sell if the buyer agrees to it. So this is very, very different than government overreach.
Yep. And then, of course, one of the biggest swings that the developer were going to have to take with the development of the Fox site is the fact that the St. Patrick's owned parking garage, which is in degradation, there's no guarantee they're going to redevelop or even demolish that site. You got to understand that St. Patrick Hospital just recently stopped being a baby hospital. So they stopped doing maternity wards and everything like that. And that was a major kind of like shock to the Missoula community just recently. So that if that's an indication that they're cutting funding, it doesn't seem like they're too interested in investing or even bothering with the site in general. I mean, you got to understand that St. Pat's is not locally owned or operated. It is a group out of people out of Seattle, Spokane, what you name it, it's a whole CEO corporation kind of thing. So there's much doubt in the development of that site, and so the developer will have to deal with the potentially major eyesore that is the parking garage as yet another risk of that particular site, which also used to be a dump before it was a theater, the Fox Theater, which is what's called the Fox Triangle. So a lot of interest in this property for the past 40 years, and thus has a lot of interest in its future. Input has always been a major thing, and at one point this site also includes the hospital properties and surrounding owners opting into a major development under John Eng and Nick Chakota. However, pandemic happened, and there was not a lot of money being put in and invested in it as well. And I covered a Bonner Community Council a couple of months ago where they're talking about the Kettle House Amphitheater music season, in which they pretty much, if not halved their lineup for the Kettle House Amphitheater, which kind of definitely shows the signs of the slowing down times of the post-pandemic economic slowdown. So all this before, I suspect the parking garage will remain for some time before pressure to tear it down or the city using MRA to help with the deconstruction overall. However, the people at the new hotel will most likely have to deal with the view of the parking garage. So while those amendments were being focused in this meeting, Daniel Carlino and Kristen Jordan voted in favor of the amendment while 9 opposed, thus the amendment failed in the end. This agreement and plan is now approved and in place for development over the next couple of years. No word on groundbreaking since this is just kind of like the beginning parts of the meeting. Committee of the Whole dove into the publishing public emails to the City Council for the prospect of public engagement, which is also done during the pandemic, but wanted to carry this on technology through the to catch us up with the city. So part of this has to do with the fact that Committee of the Whole is a meeting where they talk about some of the rules change and other things like that. And part of this is when people email, they want to have that public comment on the record, as opposed to people who attend the meeting to have their public comment on the record. So they want to add that in terms of just general public comments. And so one of the issues that the city had to deal with was the overabundance of comments through the internet. Go figure. So that's what they wanted to do, just want to figure out how to incorporate online comments for their public meeting processes. So that's just one of the things that they're going to look into as well moving forward. But also Public Works hosted the Parking Commission as they expanded their boundaries to include the hip strips and surrounding areas. So without further ado, here is a kind of like a photo or a image of the kind of area that they want to adapt and adjust and add to the Parking Commission. So if you kind of look in this particular area right here, this is Higgins Avenue with Brooks about here. Generally, this site, they have the markers right here to basically have zones of interest in terms of people parking and the frequency of people use of this particular area, with the darker colors being geared towards the people who use it the most. And they just want to figure out the right areas to incorporate it. For the most part, Hip Strip is going to be bombarded, and even more of those parking kiosks to require paid parking off the Hip Strip. So that's a big, kind of a big change in Missoula as we're growing, and that site has always kind of been fairly bare. And then we're going to talk about some public works. They host, not public works, my bad. We're moving on to public safety and health, which they're talking about fire season, the emergency planning, and this meeting focuses on wildfires. And the city of Missoula doesn't really have a plan in terms of wildfires. They have a lot of procedures, a lot of things in place, but wildfires are so wild, it's kind of hard to predict, especially in a town that is surrounded by forests. So Adrian Beck, Office of Emergency Management, talks about this and what Missoula is lacking.
Wildfire is up top of mind, not just because it's July, but for a couple other reasons as well. In that, when we look at the national kind of hazard ranking of where does Montana sit from a wildfire hazard standpoint, we sit very, very high relative to the rest of the country. Western Montana specifically sits even higher. When we look at our pre-disaster mitigation plan, which is a process of analyzing, ranking, and profiling the hazards that we're likely to face in Missoula specifically, and we rank those relative to all of the other hazards that we're likely to face, wildfire always comes out on top. And so.
Yep, so wildfire is a major deal, and as we're going into it a little bit further, she's been involved with many emergency development in the emergency management, and was dealing with a good chunk of the homeless population in terms of COVID-related emergencies. So that was a big part of her work during that time. And then, of course, fires are starting in Montana, and you can go to IncendiWeb for more information on that, and it kind of gives you an up-to-date map of everything that's happening in terms of fires. You can see these different fires around here. Just seeing a good swath. You got the Deer Creek fire, which is 100% containment at 75 acres. That was the one fire that you probably saw up on the mountain. You got the Dominic fire down south about 15 hours ago. Then, of course, I think the big one I wanted to mention as well is I think the biggest one in Montana is about 10,000 acres, and that's very southern part of the Bitter area. It even could even bleed part into Idaho as well. So Adrian talks about solutions to prevention and response in terms of the wildfire season.
One is that we're going to promote fire resilient landscapes. What do fire resilient landscapes look like? It's not just logging. Okay, it's not just thinning the forests, it's comprehensive treatment of the landscape in such a way that landscape is fire resilient. It doesn't mean that it's not going to burn. It's going to mean that it is a healthy forest that can receive fire in a healthy way that is restorative to that forest and ecological system.
Yep, so there's a lot of things that they want to do to help prevent fires from spreading, and of course, lowering the amount of embers that can get caught on fire and get carried over for miles to basically set other things on fires, to hazardous vegetation that is on-growing and growing next to your homes, because if the tree catches on fire that is so close to your home, it is a higher risk of fires spreading. It's from the realization of California moving into constant fire danger year-round. Montana's fire season has been a thing for over 2 decades now. Wildfires happen, but fire seasons are pretty much the guarantee that there is going to be a fire, 1 or 2 fires every year, and that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 2 decades in Montana alone. It's these kind of efforts and knowledge that got the Deer Creek fire 100% contained with only 75 acres burned after only starting on July 18th, which is less than 2 weeks ago. Adrian also talks about the shortcomings the hotshots and crews have to deal with in terms of fire mitigation and fire management.
The perception that we kind of have to battle is that there will always be a robust response with unlimited resources that are available. And unfortunately, that perception becomes somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that every time we see a large fire, we see the tankers and we see the helicopters and we see tons and tons of firefighters being deployed on the ground. And in the 90% of the time, that may be reality. But in those extreme weather events, in those extreme conditions where you have a wind-driven fire in very dry conditions, that may not be a reality. And that is where our biggest and best strategy is going to be ignition-resistant communities, that fire-adapted community piece that we really need to work on so that we have a much better chance of recovering from that wildfire in a better way.
Yep. So, yep, they're just trying to figure out the best ways and the best motion forward. It's very much like how a lot of roads districts and other departments of transportations work on mitigating traffic-related fatalities, especially when it comes to like intersections of Mullen and Reserve, which on average does have incidents involving pedestrian and car collisions. So those are the things that are happening, and they want to make sure that they have like zero incidents moving forward. And many reasons why, the California fire spread with a little help was because of the 100+ mph wind, preventing a lot of the helicopters from dropping buckets of retardant and water onto the fire as it was happening. And mind you, airlines won't even take off if there's about 30 to 40 miles per hour of wind. So that's one of the things that they might have to deal with, because like, heck, we had late July gusts of wind just this year, not to be confused with the major windstorm that we dealt with last year. It kind of feels like late July, early August is dealing with some interesting lightning and rainstorms happening this weekend too. And in general, with just the wind being such a prevalent thing, it kind of really feels like late July gusts are going to become a normal thing. I mean, I know this might be just the second year, but it's just one of those things you never know, meaning, you just never know. So in terms of evacuation, Adrienne is not too confident in terms of the current process because we don't necessarily have an evacuation plan.
Evacuations is probably the single most question that I get from the public is, what is the evacuation plan? I know you have one. What is it? Can I see it? And it's not quite that simple, right? If we were living on a coast and it was a tsunami evacuation plan, I'd be able to pull it out, show you the map, see the signs painted on the street. But wildfire is so dynamic that it is very challenging to say, this is the definitive evacuation plan, this is the definitive protective action that you are going to always take in the face of wildfire. Wind is the biggest variable, and which direction that wind is blowing, the conditions that exist, are we in moderate fire danger, are we in high fire danger, are we in extreme conditions, are all going to dictate kind of what that population protection, what that evacuation is going to look like. And unfortunately, that has to be made somewhat in real time based on the resources that are available, based on what is actually happening on the ground.
Yep. So, one of the things that were asked during this particular meeting with the Q&A back and forth was like, the reluctance of people being evacuated from their homes. And so far and so good, there hasn't been too many people who are just like, I don't want to leave my home regardless of a fire danger that's going to be coming barreling down my house as well. So a lot of people are pretty receptive when they need to evacuate their homes, especially in fire season and people who've been in Montana. But you just never know if there's going to be somebody who just is stubborn enough to stay behind in these evacuation orders. So overall, the Office of Emergency Planning wants to address many of these challenges and mostly be able to create shelters for those displaced by fires and natural disasters to unexpected weather events like flash floods that we were supposed to be having this week. There's a flash flood warning that went into effect last week. However, it has been a warning. These kind of weather events are very uncommon, and by the time they get here, they're weakened by the Rocky Mountains and or inversion that keeps weather in check down here in the valley. While many of us were fortunate with the fires popping up and getting managed throughout the time, especially with the Big Bear fire in the Bitterroot south of Missoula at 11,000 acres. That started the 9th of July, and they expected to be contained by October 1st. Wildfires can't be stopped. They just manage and created the boundaries of containment. Planes slow down the fires, and crews create zones to stop the fires from spreading further. October is always a goal of many fires, as it tends to be the colder months leading to the breaks in the fires. However, it really feels like the seasons are starting earlier and lasting longer. And up next, we're going to switch gears and throw it over to something fun from our camps. We had a bunch of camps, and we did some fun videos, and this is just one of the many fun videos that we did. This is through our documentary camp where we made a mockumentary about a sports icon, and I won't say anything further. You're going to hear all the information right now. In that one moment, Dusty Sosa's career ended. You know things get serious when the photo turns black and white and zooms in. At a young age, Dusty Sosa signed one of the biggest contracts in sports history, forming a coalition of unique athletes and plenty of copycats, but there was only one Dusty Sosa. Dusty Sosa was known for a unique class of juggling, single-handed ball tossing, but this wasn't just an ordinary feat of skill. They say he was the greatest to ever do it. He would wow people for hours just tossing it up and up and up, but never for one moment dropping the ball. Until now. Dusty Sosa went away for many years to hone his craft to become the best single ball juggler alive. When he dropped the ball, it seemed uncanny. Dusty Sosa was at the Missoula Public Library signing cards, napkins, and paper towels. Before you knew it, people began to pressure him into tossing his lone bouncy ball that never once knew the plastic experience all bounceable balls have, hitting the ground.
Hey, Dusty, you gonna perform for us? You gonna toss the ball? We want to see it. We want to see it. Come on, man.
We want to see it.
Come on.
You don't want to see me throw the ball up, do you?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. All right.
That would be Dusty Sosa's biggest mistake. Dusty's team didn't allow outside cameras into his demonstration, but one cell phone eked through. We tried to get an interview with Dusty Sosa, but he was resistant.
No, Dusty, stop. Get away. I'm not talking to you.
Hey there, sports fans. Back again for another sports rant. Dusty Sosa. Dusty Sosa. I was Dusty Sosa's biggest fan. His biggest fan. And then he went and he betrayed everything he stood for. Keeping that ball in the air, everything he stood for. He had 3 world records for keeping the ball in the air, and he went and just dropped it. No. I'll tell you, sports fans, that is a betrayal of you, that is a betrayal of me, that is awful.
Tragedy struck. Witness Barb O'Neill was there when the ball hit the ground, not once, not twice, but perhaps we'll never know for sure.
I saw it bounce 7 times. My husband said he saw it bounce 10 times, but he's surely making that up. If you count the number of times that the ball bounces right after it leaves Dusty's hands, you can clearly see it's 7.
We collaborated with the top tech engineers for 3D modeling with the NFL to create this scene for you. We used the latest in duper technology using the fastest Imptel prop super. We asked expert Chet Brenda, who is an engineer for the top-selling bouncy balls in the tri-state area.
Actually, I don't know why they say it the tri-state area, because we're based in Seattle, but bouncy balls were not meant to stay in the air.
And on that day, Dusty Sosa was just another civilian who bounced his bouncy ball that once gave him fame, but now is his shame. This has been the worst disaster in juggling since old Butterknife Johnson began juggling with spoons. Dusty Sosa's reputation was tarnished forever to walk the life of a civilian seeking glory that will never come his way. To this day, no one ever saw Dusty Sosa again, because he was just like any famous one-hit wonder. You know the song, but forget the band. Good night, everyone.
Ready, guys?
Woo, Dusty! Woo, let's go, Dusty! Dusty! Oh, we love you!
I pledge allegiance to Dusty Sosa, master of the mighty toss, and to the craft for which it stands, one ball, one hand, under spotlight, indivisible with rhythm and awe for all.
I hope you enjoyed that fever dream of a short mockumentary about unknown athlete of weird origins. But we're going to jump right into some other movies that are coming out this weekend. It's time for Pre-Critic, where I prejudge a movie based on absolutely nothing but biases towards movies in general. Kicking things off is a movie called Together. It's supposed to be a horror movie about codependence, where the two couples starts fusing together. It kind of feels like it's a piece where like boomer parents are telling their kids, is like, if you guys don't give me grandkids, you're gonna fuse together into a monster. It's like, yeah, whatever. And that's basically what this movie is. This horror, essentially, when you get too close to your partner to a point your body begins to fuse together, hence the title Together. Not an original concept, but a story that is basically a body horror against the one you love, who is killing your independence, literally, by forcing two bodies together in a Cronenberg kind of mess. Think about twins that absorb their sibling in vitro, but imagine that they put a snooze button on that for quite some time and then they start fusing together. And I assume there will be two-headed with both man and woman as they create new life while giving up their own. It's kind of like a reverse of having a kid, where two bodies come together and then they form a whole new body. To two becomes one instead of two becomes three. So it's interesting, and it's a horror film. It's just a movie. And moving on, we got The Naked Gun. Yes, nothing like a rebooted movie where they added "the" in front of the title. Remake of Leslie Nielsen's movie, rest in peace, for like 10 years. Enjoying a comedy that puts a straight man front and center in a hapless account of the LA police and the ridiculous nature of essentially making fun of old school cop shows from Dragnet to Kojak. Enjoy your typical LA noir setting spoof movie that really hasn't been relevant since Kim Kardashian destroyed it with a disaster movie. Just kidding. They destroyed themselves. Enjoy Liam Neeson in a movie that was written by the same people that made Pop Star Never Stop Not Stopping. One of the alums of the SNL writing crew is part of this, so something to look forward to. And also they got The Bad Guys too, or you can talk about the bad girls, because there's bad girls in this one now, because in the first one there was bad guys, but now they're trying to turn over a new leaf, and then there's bad girls being like, we don't want to turn over a new leaf, we want to grow some new leaves, some thieving bad girl leaves. And so that's kind of like the whole story of where the bad guys get looped up into this kebab of thief women, bad girls, and they have to prevent them from stealing by also pretending that they're going to steal, and then maybe they do. It's a heist movie. You know, you got your heist movie where everything kind of wraps up nicely in the end, where it's just like, I had you guys fooled the whole time. It's like, did you? No, but the writers did. And, you know, for dramatic effect, you know, that's kind of how it is. And people like their dumb heist movies where they're just like, it's a magician's trick. It's where, like, you didn't see this coming. And who's excited for the Now You See Me trilogy, the third of the movies where they actually reveal Now You See Me, Now You Don't. All right, moving on, we have up next is the new dubbing stuff. It's been a while since I did a new dubbing stuff. It seems to be a very popular video on my YouTube channel compared to just my regular morning show, but I guess some people really like it, and some people have called a lot of this rubbish. So enjoy this rubbish from the 1957 film, The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Dad! Oh, of course you were, and you're the most handsome of them all. You were very great, and you could shoot hoops and do all sorts of...
Well, now reality's starting to set in. I can't do things in your world that I used to be able to do in mine.
It's not the end of the world. I still think that we can make this work. We just have to believe in ourselves and...
Hey, listen, I'm really sorry I yelled at you earlier. It's just I have a short temper.
Oh, that was a really bad joke.
Hey guys, welcome back. Let's talk about some things that are happening downtown. It is First Friday this week, and First Friday means that there's a bunch of new art on all the galleries in Missoula. Kicking things off at Warden's Market, of all places, is we're having Live with Land. It's a mural celebration. So they painted a mural right next to Warden's Market. Join the Missoula Downtown Foundation with a Live with the Land mural celebration at Warden's Market. Light refreshments with artist Madison Perrins speaks about her inspiration behind Missoula's newest mural. So check that out. Kicking things off at at 4 o'clock today. Most of the stuff is happening from 5 to 8 p.m., but these are some of the things that are happening a little bit earlier. Starting at 4:30 p.m. at Four Ravens, there's Pour, Vessels of Flow and Function show. The August-September show features collections for 14 clay artists from Four Ravens Gallery. This exhibit gathers collections of handcrafted potteries from statewide groups and Montana clay. The forms designed to pour, serve, and spill. Each piece is a celebration of motion and intention, can celebrate the creations that pour. Then we got Indelible. It's ceramic works by Kayla Noble. The Clay Studio of Missoula exhibition is showcasing the works of wood-fire artist in residence at the Clay Studio since 2023. Noble has spent the last 2 years leading the community Anagama firings at the Clay Studio and developing this body of work. She crafts vessels that push the creative expression of clay, create unique and dynamic surfaces with her firing methods. In addition to leading wood fire programming, Noble has taught and presented in wood firing across the United States. Quote, "My relationship with clay is deep. It is both romantic and ephemeral. I feel connected to the materials I used to form my work and the trees used to fire it. Understanding the materials and process and technique levels opens the door for transcendent experience where my gut and intuition take control. In a world often governed by precision, uniformity, my pursuit of wood firing pottery is a homage to the unpredictable, primal, and beautiful imperfections." So, end quote. Indelible is an exhibit till the end of August with reception from 5 to 8 p.m. tonight, and their regular gallery hours are 12 to 5 Monday through Friday with a 12 to 3 on Saturdays. They also do some Sunday pottery lessons as well. So Clay Studio Missoula is more than just a gallery. It also does art guides and training and certifications. I don't know if they do certification, but regardless, they do classes. Then we got this next one, which is For Artists Colorful Souls. This is Gallery 709 inside the Montana Art and Framing. Gallery 709 is featuring 4 artists' colorful souls, new works in ceramics, mixed media, and paintings by artists Susan Carlson, Lori Olfer, Joe Yardley, and Valerie Yardley from August 1st to the 29th. This is from 5 to 9 p.m. with music and refreshments off of 709 Ronan Street. You can go to gallery709.com for more information. Following, we got some more happening at the Missoula Art Museum. This is Alana Buffalo Spirit. The opening of Through a Cheyenne Woman's Eyes features ledger drawings and paintings by nationally renowned artist Buffalo Spirit, a senior member of the Saati Band of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe. I totally butchered that, but this compelling exhibition showcases mixed media works on antique account sheets, maps, and canvases drawing from Northern Cheyenne history, culture, and matriarchal values. Buffalo Spirit's inspiration includes traditional ledger art, her personal lineage, and even with the film Woman in Gold, which influenced her recent use of gold leaf. And the artist talk is at 5:30 p.m., where Buffalo Spirit will share the stories of inspiration behind the powerful work honoring the sacred role of Cheyenne women. Enjoy live music by Dawn Patrol, and live music and artist talks at 5:30 p.m., and it's free admission, free expression. As always, many of these places are free access. You just have to walk in there. They have some hors d'oeuvres and refreshments in many of those locations as well. These are the ones I'm just kind of mentioning just solely based on the fact that many of them have artist imagery to kind of reflect what they got here. This is Judy Ann Johnson being featured at Bernice's Bakery. And in her quote, photographer Judy Ann Johnson makes Missoula her home in her upcoming show exhibition. She explores abstraction by photographing locations around Missoula. Her photographic approach is instinctual and her subject diverse. Her photography is more about the how and why than the what and what grabs her emotional and captures her imagination. She photographs the land, places, decay, history, animals, and people. She draws from the whimsy of humor in life, which often makes it a way into the photographs. She also lives in Oregon, Washington, Indiana, New York State. She travels extensively, more recently making several solo road trips across the America in 2021, and 2023, keeping it to small highways and byways, which has traveled to France, Iran, and she travels to and Phoenix, Arizona. It was in Phoenix at the workshop this spring that she discovered the magic and freedom of abstract photography. Sorry, I was just a little distracted. All right, moving on. At the Artist Shop, Somewhere Free. Artist Shop, Somewhere Free, Cassidy Malcolm From the peaks of Montana to the hearts of Paris, Somewhere Free follows Cassidy's journeys through the natural and human-made landscapes that give her sense of place and freedom. And so their artwork is going to be featured at the artist shop. Not much in terms of information from there, but we're going to wrap things up at the Confluence Center. Two voices, Cameron and Quinton Decker, are both multidisciplinary artists aware of the importance of history and ancestry. Cameron's art practice is guided by intuition, memory, and connection to place. His works with natural material carries meaning, memory, and deep time geological histories compressed into color. Whether working in painting, drawing, printmaking, or public art, Cameron's hope is to honor those who have shaped him. Quinton's work spans painting, sculptures, and photography, exploring themes of identity, perception, and social mythology. This exhibit will feature two bodies of work in paintings and photography, the first of which reframes the dehumanized mystical creatures in order to examine power of the colonial imagination, and in the other, to examine humanity and the erosion of the American dream. Together, the work reflects on what it means to be seen as humans, as monstrous, or as something in between. So a little bit of that going on into your weekend of art. So before I wrap up my show, I want to talk about a lot of things that are wrapping up. So some of the wrap up of the last couple of weeks were a bit crazy, with the Trump and his Epstein ties making it clear his connection with Epstein might have been more than surface value friendship. While Epstein files were promised by the Trump administration in full, many of his cabinet members, with Kash Patel, whose whole thing was essentially this theory and many extreme right-wing ideology. However, as information access was easy for the head of FBI, it became clear sooner than later that it wasn't just a left or right thing, it was a power thing. The closest thing these files got to being released in some form is in the flight plan of many high-profile people like Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, and more dots are connecting. And while that's the main focus on the administration, documents are coming out in regards to MLK and JFK. And in terms of FBI documents, Martin Luther King Jr., the biggest reveal back in 2014, when the unredacted letter from the FBI implying that the preacher to take his own life or risk revealing his affair. Mind you, this was mostly because J. Edgar Hoover was obsessed with communists and believed MLK Jr. to be one. So those 80,000 documents purged were used as an attempt to distract and divert attention, thus creating more attention to the situation. However you shake it, this is something that has been a bigger impact on voting base for Trump, more than anything that is administrative, from canceling our $24 million grant to East Missoula corridor. Under the current administration and actions by Congress, grant funding for transportation infrastructure may have been difficult to secure. Passage of Trump's administration's Big Beautiful Bill revoked the $24 million grant awarded to the county and addressed safety concerns along the Highway 200 corridor between East Missoula and Missoula. The section of road has been dangerous for bikes and pedestrians, especially when you're going under the underpass of the railroad tracks. Let me actually go back. It wasn't the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill. It had the idea that they used the word equity, and a lot of times the algorithm robot that was kind of scanning through all the grants and all the things and fundings in the United States essentially found the word equity within that, and were able to take that out. So from what I've read about it further. While funding is limited, the long-range transportation plan looks to address congestion and safety while also being cost savings, reducing drive-alone commutes by 34% by 2045, while tripling bike, walk, and transit commutes by the same year. We're growing, but there's just not a lot of space for drivers. This has a lot to do with the net carbon goals by 2050 for the city and county of Missoula. The original plan was a bike ped trail and sidewalk while expanding the underpass, where a bulk of the budget would have gone. The state of Montana is tackling the rules of electric scooters, or e-bikes, as the blanket term for vehicles capable of going high speeds but lack the components to be considered motorized vehicles. So HB 588 reflected those specifics, e-bikes that don't have seats that require standing, and hence those laws will cover seatless drivers. Under the new law, riders of motorized scooters or similar devices may obey all traffic laws and have white headlights and rear red taillights affixed to either device or the rider's body or helmet. Riders younger than 18 must always wear a helmet. No special license is required to ride an electronic scooter or other seatless devices. For mopeds and motorcycles, riders must obtain motorcycle endorsement on their driver's license. So just add a little extra letter to your Class D license. However, these laws also restrict more than 30 miles per hour of speed, curb your speed. especially that one guy in Missoula blasting through downtown on a regular basis. This law could actually get you a speeding ticket. This could also overly open the door for e-scooter rentals as an alternative for drunk drivers to mitigate those risks, as the state of Montana doesn't have laws against biking while under the influence. More recently, it seems like Missoula's homeless population has been seen more and more as Johnson Street closure begins its final month. But the story isn't so much about Johnson Street Shelter, but an executive order taking folks basically history of mental illness, which tends to go hand in hand with homelessness, and frankly, the expenses to cover folks also got slashed through this big, beautiful bill. This new executive order reaffirms the old ways of forced institutionalism with interpretations of mental illness less than desirable. Essentially, this, as the president's attempt to quickly fix the problem, it also opens the door to creating a new wave of institutionalized citizens. While this might sound good in getting some of the more extreme cases off the street, there is that kind of like short term and long-term treatment that is also counter to the 1960s, which saw trends of mental institutions becoming less desirable as a whole. You know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a great example of a movie that depicted the cruel nature of mental institutions, or one of the protagonists get lobotomized after a violent outburst. In the vein of change, many resources were created to meet people where they're at and be able to work with families and help those who would eventually become functional members of society. Missoula definitely prides itself on keeping a lot of aging adults inside their homes through the Missoula Aging Services, and try to advocate with their families and their caregivers to help support people and keep people independent and in their homes. And so that was a big part of, even with mental illness, trying to figure out how, when Medicaid was enacted in 1965, included provisions known as the Institutions for Mental Disease Exclusion. So they actually defunded institutions which barred federal reimbursements for care facilities in psychiatric hospitals. This created a powerful incentive for states to move patients out of asylums into less costly and often inadequate community-based settings. So the problems didn't change, they moved. The executive order promotes expanded use of the Assisted Outpatient Treatment AOT, a tool that remains too rare and underfunded. Studies of the New York AOT program, known as Kendra's Law, show that court-ordered outpatient care can significantly reduce hospitalizations, arrests, and homelessness among the serious mentally ill. But AOT has limits. For most impaired individuals, outpatients cannot begin until inpatient stabilization has occurred, which means they can have stay indefinitely in those cases. And the AACLU put out a statement saying the order titled Ending Crime and Disorder in American Streets directs the Justice Department to expand indefinite forced treatment for people with mental illness, disabilities, or substance use disorders, and those living in the streets who cannot care for themselves. The order also purports to eliminate federal funding for evidence-based programs like harm reduction and housing first. They save lives and direct funding towards cities and states that criminalize substance use disorder, punish people for sleeping outdoors, and enforce laws targeting unhoused people, end quote. So with that, I'm gonna end my morning show. It's about time for me to wrap things up, and I thank you guys for joining me. And for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Ramf.